In retrospect, it wasn't just the winding road or the late hour that should have unnerved me. It was everything. The sun had just slipped below the horizon when I turned onto the gravel lane. Highway miles behind me, I gripped the steering wheel as if it were my only lifeline, watching the taillights disappear into rolling blackness. My headlights pierced the mist, but only for a few feet before the darkness swallowed them. I was alone, or so I thought. The map on the passenger seat had looked promising, a line that would cut hours off my drive home to Chicago. But maps in these parts seemed to lie. All around me, towering pines shrouded the sky, their needles whispering secrets in the breeze. Something about the silence was unsettling. Even the crickets and frogs, normally loud at night, were eerily quiet. The forest felt like it was holding its breath. I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw nothing but emptiness. Yet I felt eyes on me. Every so often, a sound would snap me out of my thoughts. Branches cracking underfoot, or a distant rustle of leaves. My knuckles went white on the wheel, but I pressed on. Maybe there was a storm coming. The air tasted electric. The temperature in the car dropped inexplicably, causing my breath to fog. Just as panic began to set in, up ahead I saw a dim glow. My pulse quickened. There, nestled among the trees, was a small building with a single light on. Relief washed over me. Perhaps I could ask for directions or a break. The road forked. A crooked sign pointed left and right, the letters nearly unreadable in the gloom. The old wooden post had a word carved roughly into it: Hollow Road. A shiver ran down my spine as I processed the chipped paint of the sign. Somewhere in the back of my mind, a whisper of caution floated up, but my fatigue overrode it. I needed shelter, warmth, a break from this endless night. I turned the wheel toward the light beckoning through the trees. The car sputtered on the loose gravel, kicking up a small cloud of dust that glowed in the headlights for a moment. I switched on the radio again, hoping for a voice. There was none. The dial scratched over empty static, uncaring. The silence pressed on me like a weight. In a final attempt, I turned off the engine. The hum ceased. In the still air, I realized how loud my own heartbeat sounded. I shouldered open the car door and stepped out. A cold breeze sliced through me as it swept across the clearing. The forest around me fell silent yet again, as if the world were pausing for what was next. I grabbed my jacket from the passenger seat and crossed the yard toward the cabin. Each crunch of gravel underfoot made me jump a little. I was going where few people had, and whatever lay ahead, I couldn't turn back now. The porch light swayed slightly as I reached the cabin. It was small, lonely-looking, the kind of place you'd expect only in storybooks, not out here in the middle of nowhere. Log walls were gray with age, and the sloping roof sagged as if weighed down by time. Patches of moss climbed over the wood. I paused at the threshold, catching the smell of damp pine and something faintly acrid in the air. There was no welcome mat, no sign of life. I turned the knob and pushed the door gently. It swung open with a creak. Inside, the warmth from a tiny fireplace brushed against me. The kerosene lamp on the table was lit, casting shaky shadows. Dust hung thick in the air, lit by the lamp's orange glow. It seemed everything had been left hastily. A half-finished newspaper on a counter, an old coat draped over a chair. On the hearth, the logs smoldered as if someone had stoked it only hours ago. I shivered, but it wasn't from the cold. "This has to be empty," I murmured to myself, but something wasn't right. A rocking chair sat in front of the fire, turned away as if its occupant had just stepped outside. I glanced around. A beaten-up radio, an open book, and on the floor, piles of papers and drawings. The papers looked like a child's sketches at first glance, houses and trees, but on closer inspection I saw oddities. The tree had too many branches like reaching arms, and the figures had eyes dark and hollow. Hesitant, I lifted one of the drawings. It showed a house on a hill, smoke curling from the chimney, and a tall figure with a blank face standing outside. It reminded me of the cabin, but different, distorted. As I held it, a low creak echoed behind me. My head whipped around, but nothing had moved. I stepped further inside. On a shelf, I spotted a bundle of brittle letters tied with string. Opening one, the words April 12th and gone caught my eye through the faded ink. The rest was too smudged to read, but the tone was frantic. I dropped it, heart pounding. I set my bag down gently and turned back to the entrance. The silence of the cabin pressed around me. I crept to the door and latched it shut behind me. The door clicked, a small measure of security, as if I could bar out whatever had come here before. I exhaled slowly. The old radio was still in the corner. On impulse, I clicked it on. Static erupted until a crackling voice spoke, "Hollow Road." The words were barely audible, but the name of the street felt like a warning repeated aloud. My heart lurched. I turned the dial, but only hiss remained. I wandered through the dim cabin, eyes running over the mismatched furniture. A whitewashed kitchen table stood too large for the room, its surface cracked and stained. A mug sat next to the pile of drawings I'd found, dried coffee inside. Someone had poured a cup in haste. As I reached to touch it, I jerked my hand back. The surface of the table felt ice cold. The chilly air felt unnatural. The lantern swayed again, though no breeze moved. It seemed the cabin was unsettled by my presence. With nothing else to do, I kicked off my boots and settled by the fire for warmth. I tried to shake off my nerves. My eyes kept darting to the window, expecting to see movement beyond. But through the window, the dark forest stared back, still and unmoving. Night settled over the cabin like a blanket of ink. Outside, the wind picked up. Tree branches scrapped against the windows. I stared into the dying embers of the fire, waiting for sleep, but exhaustion eluded me. Finally, I crawled into a rough cot in the corner of the living area and pulled a threadbare blanket over myself. The wood beneath me was hard and uneven. I twisted and groaned. Somewhere outside, an owl called, sharp and lonely. I hadn't drifted off, though. Sleep felt uneasy here. The air grew colder. I was sure I heard something. A soft shuffle on the roof, or the groan of settling wood. My ear caught the faintest murmur, as if a voice were speaking just beyond understanding. I forced my eyes open. The lamp on the table flickered. I swung my legs out of the cot and stood up. The cabin was quiet again. The lamp's flame steadied. I told myself it was nothing but the storm. Then I heard it clearly, a whisper right behind me. It was soft, a woman's voice calling my name. I jumped. "Hello," I snapped. There was no answer, only the howl of wind. My heart raced as I searched the empty room. I turned toward the curtained window, peering into the blackness outside. Was someone out there? The trees were still. I swallowed hard. Trying to steady my nerves, I picked up a small notebook from the floor near the fireplace. It was old, leather-bound, its pages yellowed. On one page, hurried scribbles in shaky handwriting spelled out, "Keep quiet, she's in the walls." The words seemed to wrinkle before my eyes. I looked around. The walls, the floor, the very air pressed in on me. A sudden creaking noise made me jump. The door of the rocking chair in front of the fire slowly pushed itself back and forth, and the lights in the cabin flickered wildly. My breath caught in my throat. Whatever had been whispering was here in the room, and it was growing impatient. My fingers tightened around the handle of a nearby fireplace poker, and I crept toward the door. The boards of the cabin floor groaned under my weight. I pressed my ear against the wood. Silence. The night seemed to hold its breath. Summoning courage, I tried the door again. It was firmly locked, though I had never intentionally closed it. I rattled the knob, shouting into the darkness, "Who's there?" Only to have my voice swallowed by the vast emptiness outside the cabin. When I turned back, the rocking chair was empty, and the room was still. My heart pounded loud in my ears. In that quiet, I heard it again, a faint sobbing, so soft at first I thought I imagined it, then clearer. A woman calling for help, trapped behind those walls. I could feel tears pricking my eyes, raw fear drowning every thought. I didn't believe in ghosts. Yet here I was, holding a child's drawing that warned me to keep quiet. Adrenaline drained away, leaving me weak-kneed. The flames flickered low, casting grotesque shapes on the walls that seemed to shift when I wasn't looking. A sudden, ear-splitting bang echoed through the cabin as if something heavy had fallen outside. My breath caught in my throat. Panic surged. I bolted upright in the cot, nearly dropping the journal from my hands. Outside, rain began to drum on the roof, and thunder rumbled in the distance, as though the storm had just decided to join the misery inside. I had to know. Shaking, I stepped onto the porch. Lightning flashed again, illuminating the empty porch and the black forest beyond. In that stark light, I felt something brush against my shoulder. Dawn's gray light crept through the cabin windows, and I awoke on the sofa, the notebook still in my grasp. Last night felt real, too real. My body ached where I'd banged it against the door. I swigged the last of the cold coffee from the mug, then set out to understand what was happening to me. The journal, the drawing, the woman's voice, I needed answers. I began methodically. Kneeling by the hearth, I carefully lifted one of the old bricks from the fireplace's stone face. Inside, I found a small metal box. My fingers shook as I pried it open. Inside were a handful of yellowed newspaper clippings and a faded photograph. The photograph was the size of a postcard. In it, a woman stood on the porch of the cabin. Her face was pale and blurred, her eyes empty holes. On the back, someone had scrawled, "Eleanor Harper." My blood ran cold as I realized who she was. The missing woman from the clippings. I began to sort the newspapers. One headline read, "Local wife vanishes. Police investigating strange cabin incident." The article dated back decades. Eleanor Harper, wife of a local lumberjack, had disappeared one night after telling her husband she would never return. He claimed she ran off, but the community whispered otherwise. Another clipping had a recent date and described the wreck on Hollow Road. Tourist critically injured near Hollow Road. Name not released. I recognized the photo of the victim in the article. It was me. I stood frozen, partly on the road and partly in a dream. My limbs felt heavy, unreal, and my voice was lost. There was no pain in me now, only calm. My gaze returned to the man under the sheet, the peaceful expression, the stillness of someone who had finally stopped hurting. In that instant, I understood. I was the man beneath the sheet. A noise interrupted my thoughts. A faint tap, like fingernails along the wooden paneling. I stood and peered around a wall. One of the logs near the back of the cabin had deep gouges, like someone had scraped it with nails. Beneath the gouges, the wood was chipped, as if something had been trying to get out, rather than in. Driven by a mixture of dread and compulsion, I found a hammer among the cabin's tools. With a shout, I swung at the wall. The wood cracked, then splintered. Behind the cabin's exterior wall was a cavity, black and small. A faded dress barely hung from a nail inside, and on the floor lay a skeletal hand clasping an old locket. I swallowed hard. It was her. I stared at the bones of Eleanor Harper, her body hidden behind the wall. Suddenly, I understood the hushed whisper. "She's in the walls." From behind me, I heard it again, soft and grateful. "Thank you." Eleanor's voice, no longer terrified but peaceful, flowed around me. A chill ran through me as the realization dawned. Opening the wall had freed her spirit. Adrenaline drained from me in waves. I sank to the floor, staring at the bones and the little locket. In it was a tiny portrait of Eleanor smiling, almost alive, unaware of the fate that awaited her. I clutched it, cold sweat on my brow. Outside, the first rays of sunlight burned through the old pines. I was shaken, but a strange peace settled in my chest. I had helped her find the daylight at last. Slowly, I returned the wooden panel to its place and sat back against the porch. The morning air was cool and clean. I picked up the battered photograph of Eleanor from the box. She looked back at me, her eyes hollow even in death. I whispered, "Rest now." Her spirit was free. I had done what I could. Heart still hammering, I realized I needed to leave. What remained of my journey could not continue at this cabin. I gathered my bag and stepped onto the porch. Behind me, the cabin was quiet once more, as if it were asleep. The morning air was cool on my face as I left the cabin behind me. For a moment, everything seemed normal again. My bag in hand, I walked to my car and opened the door, but my key turned in the lock with only a soft click. The car's engine was quiet. I lifted my phone from the seat. Its screen was cracked and dead. Confused, I looked up, and that's when I heard them. Sirens, muffled but nearby, growing louder by the second. My heart leapt into my throat. I half expected to see a police car turn down the gravel drive. Instead, a pair of distant headlights emerged from the fog, flashing red and blue across the trees. Two figures stumbled toward me. One held a flashlight and called out something I could not make out. "Hey!" I shouted, waving both arms. "I need help. I'm injured." They did not answer. They did not even glance my way. I stepped forward and then froze. They were looking past me, toward the road that led to the highway. I heard a faint voice on a walkie-talkie. "We've got the victim." They said they knew the driver. I stood frozen, partly on the road and partly in a dream. My limbs felt heavy, unreal, and my voice was lost. There was no pain in me now, only calm. My gaze returned to the man under the sheet, the peaceful expression, the stillness of someone who had finally stopped hurting. In that instant, I understood. I was the man beneath the sheet. Confusion churned in my stomach. Did they say my name? I yelled, but all I could hear was the static crackle. One of them moved past me with an urgent stride, shining the light on something to my right. I followed the beam and saw my car, battered and dented. The windshield spiderwebbed with cracks. The passenger airbag lay shredded. A yellow tag fluttered on the handle. It read Hollow Road, Accident Vehicle. I staggered, stunned. My hands felt suddenly cold and numb. "No," I whispered. My wounds were memories I couldn't recall making. On the front seat, there was a photo of me, but I was badly bloodied, eyes closed as if sleeping, a peaceful expression on my face. A siren wailed closer. I turned to the two figures again. They were kneeling by the side of the road, by the body of a man lying under a thin white sheet. Under the sheet, I recognized the outline. It was me. "I'm right here," I shouted again, tears pricking at my eyes. They exchanged glances, but none of them saw me standing there. The realization crashed over me. I was already gone. I had to know. Shaking, I stepped onto the porch. Lightning flashed again, illuminating the empty porch and the black forest beyond. In that stark light, I felt something brush against my shoulder. I found myself back in the cabin, but everything was different. The day had turned to dusk again, and pale lantern light filtered through the windows. I was standing in the hallway where the darkness of night now loomed. A voice called softly from the end of the hall. It was a child's voice, whispering, "Shoo." I looked up and saw a small girl standing at the doorway to the next room, her eyes voids of darkness. She had ink-black ribbons in her hair and a smile that sent a chill through me. She lifted a finger to her lips, then suddenly vanished into the wall beside her. My heart pounded as I realized I was seeing the cabin through different eyes. Beyond the broken threshold of the living room, I saw them. Pale, translucent figures gathered in the dim light. They were the missing, the lost souls I had read about. A young couple from another missing person's tale held each other. The old radio's crackle came from nowhere, the air heavy with their presence. Among them was the woman from the photo, Eleanor Harper, her eyes finally clear and at peace. She raised a hand toward me and whispered, "Thank you." It was then I understood. The voices I had been hearing were their voices, and now I was among them. I tried to speak, but only the sound of the wind answering in the rafters reached my lips. The children giggled softly, and the couple smiled sadly at me. The world felt both empty and whole. Terror and wonder clashed in me. I stepped back, fumbling for an escape. In the dim light, the door I had so urgently needed now sat just beyond reach. When I lunged toward it, I bumped into thin air. The handle was there, solid, but the frame was not. The door had vanished. All around me, the fog of memory and twilight swirled. The forest's edge peered through the walls, still black and endless. There was no path out. I was part of the cabin now. Tears welled in my eyes, but as they fell, they vanished into mist before reaching the floor. I was here and yet not here. The darkness pressed close, and the night outside echoed with distant memories of voices and laughter. In that final heartbeat, I finally understood the promise of silence. My last thought was a silent plea, "Help me." But even those words were swallowed by the emptiness. Now I belonged to Hollow Road, another story locked within its shadows. Forever lost to the world of the living, I float into the vast unknown, an echo drifting endlessly in the night.